bum bum banana. Banana dun da da da. Ba-da-da-dum dun 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 dun. Da-da-da-dum dun 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 dun. All right, gentlemen, we are here today to talk about this. I'm going to work on the how coaxial dynamics ships this thing, and rightfully they should, as much as it costs. This is not a cheap toy, I'm here to tell you. This is the Watchman. This is the Coaxial Dynamics Watchman. We're working on this for my buddy Bullet. This is a 30 UA based watch station. One for reflect, one for forward, and it's got trip sensors in it. So if you go too far here, the alarm goes. If you get too much reflect, the alarm goes off. This thing starts flashing, and then this thing starts screaming at you. Wow, 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 wow. It makes a ton of noise, right? And this is your trip adjustment set. Now, why are we here today? Well, we're going to install this from our friend down in Florida. I'm going to put a peak kit in it, because this thing only reads stock average. I did this already once for my friend Bullet. We put all the adjustments here on the back. Now, please note, my friend Bullet asked me randomly, as I had myself balls deep in one of his other amplifiers about a week ago. He goes, now, does this thing need to have a peak kit? And I'm like, yeah, I think so, Bob. So here we are. Let me pull the lid and let's take a look on the inside. The Coaxial Dynamics 81090/81091 Watchman is intended for use in continuous performance monitor and protection device and used in RF transmission systems. It is designed to be used with a dual 50 ohm socket line section. The operational frequency and power range is determined by the elements which are used. The forward meter and the display, the load, the reflect power will display the reflected load. Okay. Section 1, mounting. Into rack, stick your pinky in the freaking vegetable, and then she's going to give it up like freaking hooker on prom night, then you're babies, and then you're hot dog down the hallway the rest of your life. But you don't get to tell them that. Okay, if remote reset desired. Okay. I just want to make sure, because the one I had here before for my buddy Bob, there was a lot of stuff wrong with it, and it came from a completely different amp builder, and one of the meters was broken, and the connections on the inside were all, it was a mess. It was just a mess. So I ended up having to buy a new meter for the front of it, or a set of meters for it that matched. It was a mess. So most of the internal circuitry, like the remote and the Watchman, that kind of thing, I put all of that, just disconnected it, and then went directly to the back of the ports. And we don't use these connectors. He's got bird line sections, so I've got to make him up some out of PL259s and stuff. Make sure all connections. Okay. To prevent false alarm after AC power failures, a 2-second delay circuit has been incorporated in the trip lines. Load adjustment. The adjustment of the load. Okay. These are our remotes. This is our audible switch. Where's our power supply? Power supply. Forward trip set, forward cal. Okay, just like what we had going on as before. But I'm going to try and incorporate the alarm system in this for safety reasons. it's a power supply, some relays on the inside for trip and reset. So you can tie your whole station to this, okay? In a broadcast environment, we'd tie the whole station to this, and then on the outputs of this thing, we would have these two relays in here would drive the disconnect. So if you had lightning strike your antenna, let's say, or a tornado or hurricane come through and snap your antenna off the tower, this thing is going to see the output power go into the reflex zone, and it's going to cut the transmitter off. Put it in standby, whatever, however you want to put it. This will interrupt whatever the signal source is that's coming into this. You can do that remote, and then the other thing they've got this set up is so that you can do an external line feed to this thing to where you can retrip it. We're going to ignore all that. We don't need to worry about any of that. The only thing that we're here for today, and I think we're going to utilize this side of the cabinet, which we'll just go ahead and we'll slide this off. We'll undo all the screws, we'll drill all our holes, so we'll tape all this up. It's got to be perfect, right? I can't have the drill go zing and leave a drag mark on the side of the anodized coating, or erudite. Sorry, this is erudite. We got to do this just right. These set knobs that are over here on the front, this is strictly for the trip adjustment. So if your forward power goes too high or the reflect power goes too high, it'll cause a fault. And this thing will start screaming at you if you have it plugged in. Now what I did with his other one, since we bypassed all that other circuitry and he'd give zero shits about that, is I took and I hollowed out this lamp. I left the face of the lamp in place, but then I put, on the other one it's blue, this one's green. On the inside I put a white LED, so when he turns his peak kit on, this would light up as stock, right? So then the master reset switch doesn't do anything on the other one. We're not going to do anything with that either. Here we're going to set his reflect up. I think he's got a 1,000 watt slug and a reflex. We'll set it up for like 500-600 watts, like a lot. So he'll never trip it, but if he does, all he's got to do is hit this. This thing makes a hell of a cackle if you trip it. I'm going to show you that here in a little bit. But what we're going to do is we're going to interrupt these signal lines that come to the meter, and we're going to hook them up to the peak kit, and we're going to also give him a multiplier, which is very handy for him. Not that he doesn't have the ability to buy, but he's currently got a 50,000 watt slug. Well, he's well beyond that. An average, this last weekend, the weekend before last, we were running things, and he had about 100 watts worth of reflect, and he was burying this thing. He's keying anywhere he wanted to key, anywhere between here when he modulated, tink, off the scale, going forward, past 50 kW, right? So we're going to set this trip point way over. And the reason we want to do that, even though I know he's not going to power it, none of this garbage will work. The reset, the alarm, the indicator light, none of this shit's going to work unless he plugs it in. But we're going to set the alarm for very high. The reason we're going to do that is just in case he does decide to plug it in. I don't know why you'd do that, but if he does, as long as he's got his multiplier set correctly, this will never go over and be able to, well, yeah, it'll trip no matter what. Because we're just going to play with the signal that's getting driven to the meter. And we all know how this works. So the coupler, this is your coupler. Everybody calls it a slug in my world, but the coupler sits inside your line section. I think I got a 2 and something inch or 3 inch line section here. This is a perfect example. So here's our pickup for our line section. Okay, so take our element, we shove it down in the hole. You guys will fall over when you see how much this unit costs. So if you Google it, you're gonna be like, oh God, he just wants it to match his other units he's already got. And he wants to be able to take one meter from one amplifier and go to the other meter and the other meter back, and they vice versa for redundancy, just in case he has a problem here. He can bring his other one in the line, he's not running blind. When you get to that point where you have that much money involved in your setup, running without meters is not an option. I mean, it's not an option. Because you never know when something might go wrong. Like you might get a pinhole in a coax, or a bird might land on your feed point and blow everything up, or something might have worked just fine yesterday, might melt down today. So you want to have meters in line. I mean, At that point, we're talking hundreds of thousands of dollars into your setup sometimes, right? This couple $1,000s you're spending on this in your line section are an afterthought. But how this works is, we'll say this is a 3-inch-ish line section, right? So you put your element down in there. What it does is this sits right about, yay far from your center conductor. And it takes a small sniff, just takes a whiffet of the RF that's going through the center conductor, and through a coil that's in the bottom of the slug, element, coupler, whatever, element, it creates a small DC signal. That DC signal rides down what we use is 50 ohm coax to carry it from the coupler, and it doesn't matter if it's 316. You don't want to use open wire, because then you can have RF coupled to that wire. So we got to use coax, so it's isolated, right? It's just got to be 50 ohms. RG58 can be whatever you want, as long as it's 50 ohms, right? And then we put that in the back of the meter. That little bit of DC signal, which is derived from the AC signal, it might pick up and induce a little bit of AC signal. I'm sorry, I think it's AC driven, is what drives the meter, right? There's nothing else to it. These things work just the same as our birds, right? This unit. So what we're going to do, and what I mean by they work just like the bird elements, is bird elements for the 7/8 line section, which is also called the 43 element line section. The meters themselves, the physical meter movements, are 30 UA, 30 microamp, right? Or 30,000 microamp. When you go to the bigger meters with bird, they go to 100 UA. So immediately, all of your stuff that you've got, all your parts, your peak kit, all that kind of stuff won't work from 1 5/8 on up. So none of your elements on a 43, bird 43, will work on an 1 5/8 line section or 3-inch line section, even though they're the same. The meters are the same meter movement. They won't work on a bird 43. This element sits. Here's the center conductor. This element sits right on top, just like that, and touches it. If there is a gap, it's very small, right? Where with an 1 5/8 or 1 7/8 or whatever it is, there's a little bit of a gap. So that, and then the scales are completely different, and the amount of power they're rated to read, right? So your 7/8 line section, bird 43 line section, coaxial dynamics 7/8 line section, they're all rated to supposedly a max of 10,000 watts, but they do make a 25,000 watt peak slug for that same section. Don't trust those elements. They're very generous. The 25,000 watt element, very generous. Like, I've seen the 25,000 watt peak element read like a full 5,000 or 6,000 watts more than a 10,000 watt with a multiplier on it. I'm just saying. So we're just going to play with the signal that drives the meter. And okay, so continuing on with the big boy rich man flipping watt meter. So I built him new jumpers, because the ones that come with this thing are horrible. The amount of money that they ask for this metering system and what they send for jumpers that come off the back of this thing to the line section. I mean, I love my homies over at Coaxial Dynamics. I'm not lying, we're tight. But what I'm saying is they could probably do better. So I took some 316 jumpers, and what we're gonna do is we're gonna hook up to my 7/8 line section here. This is a 5 watt, 26 through 60 megahertz, or 25 through 60 megahertz element. I got rid of my 40 dB, excuse me, 40 dB directional coupler that I use for my oscilloscope and my spectrum analyzer. And we're going to put this 5 watt element, we're going to put it here. We're going to use the pickup on this element to drive this singular jumper. The singular jumper, we're going to hook it up Currently it's hooked up in the reflect position, and then we'll move it over here to the forward. On the inside of this thing, it dawned on me, the last one of these I did, I had to bypass all this circuitry that's in here, and I made it direct for the forward. The reflect is still active. It's bypassed in such a way that you can plug it in and your station monitor is always working. The way this guy's going to use this is probably going to be with a 1,000-watt element in forward. So with the thing plugged in, we can flip this switch, and anything that goes over 40% scale will trip the alarm. This thing's going to start howling at us. So if, we'll say in this situation, is that something actually on the screen? No, it's a shadow. Okay, in this situation with a 1,000-watt slug reading in reverse for the reflected scale, that means anything over 400 watts will cause the alarm to sound. Well, what we're doing here to test this circuitry is we have a 5-watt element here reading in forward and a 5-watt element here reading in forward. So we're going to put just a little bit over a watt. See how it's 1 box over a watt? Well, we're going to take a meter reading here. About 1 box below a watt. Okay, so let's just reach in here. There, reading exactly the same now. So now if we take and we run our carrier up, so it's 1 watt. What we heard click and then we heard the buzzer go off is these relays fire here in the back of the inside of the metering unit. What we were adjusting was this potentiometer right here, the brown one. This is our trip level adjustment that's here on the front. So we press this button, then we take a separate screwdriver with this thing's tripped, and we adjust our trip point. So right now we've got it set for 400 watts. This thing's completely passive, won't make a single noise if it's unplugged. See? Now watch. So we'll hit the reset button. So now we'll compare the two. I'd say it's pretty darn close. I mean, that's within 1% or so. So we're going to call this a win. So now, to get the exact same reaction, we're going to go back here and we're going to disconnect this jumper, which has got the coaxial dynamics attachment on it. We're going to screw this onto the forward side. Okay. What is happening? Let's turn this up on its side. Screw that down. I might need to get myself a very small-fingered woman out here to adjust that down. All right, so that's now screwed in. So now what we're going to compare is this meter scale to that meter scale. About a half a watt, about a half a watt. About 1 watt, about 1 watt. So now let's see if it stays linear. There's 2 watts, 2 watts, about 3 watts and 3 watts. There's 4 watts and 4 watts, and that's as much as I can get out of it. So the max I got for dead key on this radio is 4 watts. Hello. Okay. Not too shabby. Dead on the money. Back this back down to about a watt. Now let's go see peak. So remember, 5 watt slug, 2x position, This thing goes all to the right. That means it's in the 10 watt scale. Hello, 1, 2. Seeing about 8.5 watts. Turn the peak kit on. Hello. I think we nailed the scale over a little bit too far. So let's take this. We'll go to 5 watts now. The hang time is atrocious, isn't it? And believe me, I've gone in here and adjusted VR2 every which way you can. Which, if I'm not mistaken, VR2 is our hang time. This is like 100 to 1 turn here. Hello, audio. Now we're moving normal. There we go. So we'll go to 2x. Hello, 1, 2. Let me double check our multiplier. So here's 1x. And I have the element out. 1x. Hit the button. Directly on 100. We go to 2x and it drops to 50. We go to 5x and it drops down to 20. So the multiplier is dead on the money. No ifs, ands, or buts about it. Go ahead and we'll drop the element in here. Let's see here. Peak, 5x. Hello. 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 Close enough. The power level this guy is going to be running, it's within 500 to 1,000 watts. The way it should be, roughly. Then you got to remember, what we're adjusting to is we adjust to the meter. We cannot adjust to the elements. Well, why do you say that, BBI? Well, because coaxial dynamics and Bird both say that if I take these two elements and I put them in the exact same meter, they have to be within a 10% tolerance. 10% plus or minus, so it works out to be 20%. Each one of these elements is within 10% of being accurate, right? That's to the FAA or FCC standard, because this is considered a valid form of RF transmission measurement, this setup. So if there's a 10% tolerance built into this and a 10% tolerance built into this, you add the two together and roughly you're going to get 20%, so they say. I like to think of it a 10% plus or minus. The fact that we're able to get within 1/4 of a watt on RMS and within, what, maybe a watt or so in peak in 25x on a 25 elements on a 5 times amplification scale, these two elements are pretty close to each other, which is pretty rare. You guys have no idea how much fun I went through getting a 1,000 watt and a 1,000 watt to agree in these two line sections. I had to use about like 10 1,000 watt elements, set them all down and found 2 that matched. Sold the others. What you got to do. So anywho, this thing's done. We went ahead and did a bunch of other stuff to this. We mounted the 9-volt battery on the outside. This guy does not run a lot of peak. This battery will probably last him 4 years, right? So mounted it on the outside. Didn't want to fuddle around with having the peak kit powered off the internal supply. I didn't want to have an external supply powering into this because he's going to watch a lot of this in average. Down the side here, we did all of our peak adjustments. On the other one I built for him, I moved the 9-volt battery down and I had all the switches on the back. This is all on the side, the controls. They're laid out exactly the same. Peak and average, 1x, 2x, 5x. Remember, the only reason that we can get away with using this particular kit on this meter is because this meter is a 30 UA. If you have a bird, you know, 1 5/8 or bigger line section, you have to get a 100 UA peak kit. Your peak kit for your 30 UA meter movement will not work on a 100 meter movements. They do make a 100 UA peak kit. Our good friends down there in Florida do have and make and produce these things. Get a hold of Brian Smith at Truck CB Sales. He's a valid vendor for these things. If you're into supporting the gentleman in Florida that makes these and makes them in his shop, and this is his retirement, go buy them from Brian Smith. They're legit. The ones that you buy on eBay, they work, but we have to also understand that they are a copy that is made in China of the guy's product that is legally licensed and manufactured out of Florida. Theft is theft, copyright infringement is copyright infringement, patent infringement is patent infringement, but in China they don't give a shit about people's intellectual property. That's all out the window. So you, me, and everybody else is a red-blooded American, you know, we support America. Go buy them from Brian Smith. He's an actual authorized dealer for the appropriate person. Just saying, putting that on the table and walking away. Nothing against the gentleman that's in New York. I got no comment. I have nothing. I have no dog in this fight. I'm not trying to run him down in any way. I'm just simply saying that that product is a copy. If you want the legit, go get them from our friend in Florida, or go reach out to Truck CB Sales, Brian Smith, at truckcbsales.com, and he'll be able to supply you with the appropriate peak kit. Okay, I am going to button this up. I'm going to put right next to Bullet Bob's sticker a BBI sticker on it, just because. Just because I can. He'll probably peel it off. That's all right if he does. It's his choice. It is what it is. Gentlemen, on that note, I'm going to put this thing back into a styrofoam padded crate, and we're going to get this thing hand delivered back to Bullet and get it installed and watch it run on his system for the next 10 years, just like the other one that's been sitting down there for 5 has been doing for him. Appreciate everybody tuning in, following along. Just out here cranking out things one thing at a time. Got a lot of stuff going on in the background. A lot of it you guys are going to enjoy. A lot of it is going to be stuff that's going to be coming out on video here pretty quick. I do need to take a very quick road trip here in the next few weeks, but more on that to come when I'm ready to share and show. And believe me, share and show, I will. Big shout out to our friends at Coaxial Dynamics. Big shout out to our friends at MechMan. Big shout out to our friends at Siglent. Big shout out to Bird and Penta Labs and Excess Power. Gentlemen, I appreciate every single one of you. On that note, on to the next project, which is a 1x4 base. And it is time for that thing to get finished. I'll see you. Click, click.